Happy Friday, everybody. Colin Harper, joined by Brian in my studio here, and Mike down south, smarter one, enjoying the nice weather while we are choking on smoke up here in Pittsburgh today.
Well, it's smoke from the Canadian fires. Let's be clear on this.
Yes, that's a good clarification.
Brian.
Good clarification. We don't, we don't generally light it up in the office here on Fridays, so that's a great.
It is ahead of a holiday weekend.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Yeah, it is. It is a big holiday weekend, so maybe some cigars are in store for later on. But I think we'll save that for when I get home and not the office.
Absolutely, for sure.
Well, hey, I hope everyone has some exciting plans for the 4th of July. The markets do. Things are taking off this morning. Mike, we'll kind of get in a minute and recap a lot of what's going on over there. Also, Brian and I are going to touch on, we were talking about getting political, and Brian's like, oh, God, what are we going to talk about? There's been a lot of stuff.
That was a can of worms
we
tried to open up right
there. There's been a lot of political things going on, but specifically, we're going to touch on our topics, kind of education and fast for today on the planning side. But we'll talk a little bit about looks like about 25 minutes ago, Supreme Court came through. Made an announcement about their reaction to Biden's student debt relief plans. We'll talk about that a bit. But before we do that, Mike, before we do what Mike's going to do, you should know by now, but in case you don't, nothing here is actually specific advice. You can't get out of it that easy. You're going to have to talk to one of us to get specific advice. So nothing here is a recommendation, specific advice, anything like that. Again, thanks for joining us, everybody. Every Friday we get together, talk a little bit about the markets, talk a little bit about whatever else is going on in the world. Have a good time, get a few laughs, and listen to Mike be smarter than the rest of us. So, Mike, take it away. What's going on out there? We had a number of things to check in on today.
Yeah, it's looking like a nice week to end out the quarter in the month of July, the first half of the year. It's really been a broad rally. We had a slight down day on Monday, plenty of economic data. We heard from Powell, but market keeps marching higher. Overall, the economic data has been coming in on the upside in a good way for most metrics over the past couple of weeks. This week, we got the durable goods orders came in a beat. Consumer confidence was higher than anticipated in last month. New home sales also beat. Jobless claims ticked down. What else do we get? Oh, yeah, the PCE today, the Fed's preferred inflation measure, came in lower both on core and headline. So right now, let's see, headline is trending on a 2.5% pace right now if you look at the past 3 months, whereas core has been a little stickier. That's more in the 4.6 to 4.7% range. So that's kind of continuing with the theme that the core side is going to be a little stickier to come down. But right now, the market's digesting everything. We also heard from Powell this week. He was on a panel with the other ECB and monetary policy leaders. We had the EU monetary policy, UK, and Japan. Now, 3 of the 4 of those panels are in very restrictive territory, where Japan's doing what Japan does and pegs their rates low and keeps it stimulative. He was actually pretty funny. They were talking about lags in monetary policy, and he referenced that they're like a 10th higher in their pegged rate now than they were like 30 years ago. So he made the joke how there's about a 25-year lag in monetary policy in Japan.
Mike, I think you're one of the few people that really appreciated the true value of that joke. I did too, but it's nice to see a little levity here, especially with that holiday weekend.
Yeah,
we need some levity
pretty
injected.
Funny on the panel. You get used to hearing Powell on his scripted statements at the FOMC meetings. He goes a little more off script in this, but overall the message was they have more work to do. Most members see an additional 2 rates this year and staying at that level for a while. And he did mention, and I think you can kind of take this as a positive, he doesn't see inflation getting down to 2% until 2025. Now, yeah, that it's going to get down that slow is not a positive, but the fact that he's okay with waiting a couple years to get it down, and he's not going to throw all the forces at it now to pretty much cause the economy to be in a recession. So overall, it seems like the economic numbers are actually improving. Whether that lasts or not, I'm not sure. But the stock market's been okay with it, even with the substantial increase in rates that we've seen across the board. I think on the day or the day after that panel was the pretty much across the board a 0.15% increase in treasury rates. So that's something that typically wouldn't have been good for the longer duration stocks like tech stocks, but they continue to rally. Now, I am a little more relieved with economic numbers and encouraged by them, but I still think that might mean the Fed needs to do more. And there's also some other risks out there on the horizon, like you mentioned student loan topic. Student loan payments are set to restart later in a couple months. You also have excess savings coming down. That should be depleted by the fall. And then you've actually seen a lot of bankruptcies this year. We're at a recessionary level of bankruptcies. And so you kind of see the disconnect between smaller
Mike, is that
businesses-
on the is that on the personal side or on the business side or both?
business side.
Business side.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's certainly not really being reflected in the jobs market because the jobs market remains robust. So it's certainly an interesting environment. Maybe I think we've talked about this before, but maybe because there's such a labor shortage due to all the people retiring during COVID, maybe you don't have that same rise in unemployment rate like you've done in past monetary policy hiking cycles. But I think we're still probably in late stages versus early stages of a business cycle. So we'll just have to keep monitoring the situation. But it has been nice to see a broader participation in stocks this month. It hasn't just been the technology stocks working. It's really broadening out to the rest of the market. So that's a good thing to see. We'll see what the second half has for us in store, though.
Very cool. Well, thanks, Mike. Thank you for the update.
So we're gonna have to chalk up the first half as a win.
I would think so. Seems like it.
Well, at least we're ahead in the game.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess I don't know what the final score is going to be on December 31st, but
Nobody does. But my crystal ball may tell us later. If you stick around till the end, crystal ball's coming out.
do tell.
No. So kind of moving on from there, Mike, I think just and this is a general observation, and Brian, we were talking about this morning. It seems like we've had such a long negative news cycle. The longest I can recall in my career by far. And it's been such a drag on a lot of folks. I think what we're noticing in our practice is people are enjoying the break. I think people are enjoying the market being a little more relaxed and some more positive news surrounding that. It's nice to go into a holiday weekend and not worry about your health or your finances for a change. And it feels like, at least for the sense I'm getting, we may be there.
I think so. It's been since, COVID, of course, 2019 stock market wise, and there was no COVID at the time. Since 2020, it has been a onslaught, constant anxieties around health issues. Of course, there's some of that at the individual level, but in a global health issues, financial markets up, down, went way down in 2020, ended up pretty good. 2021 was still weird COVID time. Markets did okay. 2022, who knows on COVID? Markets not so good. None of the markets so good. And now we've got a decent first half, and we get less COVID news on the health front.
It's really been an interesting market cycle. I mean, even back 5 years, we've had, since 2018, we've had 3 bear markets, meaning more than technically 2018 got close. It wasn't officially a bear market, but close to that 20% decline threshold off of the highs. And that's more something that occurs once every 3 to 5 years, not every other year.
Well, we just like to keep you busy over there, Mike. Figured you weren't doing enough for the past decade. We got to spice it up a bit here recently. Speaking of spicing it up, this is a topic we talked about when it was first announced, the student loan forgiveness program. Yeah. And it was, Brian, I believe it was your call back then that this is going to get litigated. It's going to get tied up, and eventually it's going to get struck down. And this
doesn't surprise me a bit.
Yeah. And the more you explain that side of it, the more I kind of jumped on the bandwagon and agreed with you. And it made a lot of sense to me. And it looks like that's what happened, right? It was, turns out this is going to be just a political move versus anything that's going to have substance or provide any actual student loan relief, because the Supreme Court struck down that decision this morning, is looks like unconstitutional. So, I don't think that's a bad thing.
I think,
Personally.
it seems if the trends continue, it seems like those monies will be diverted to Ukrainian students who have debt.
Yeah, well, that's
where the rest of the money's going.
So it probably was a win-win for the Biden administration heading to the Ukrainian support. If the trend continues, it is astronomical. Well, that's kind of another hot topic too. It's astronomical the amount of financial aid Ukraine's gotten from us. Oh, it is painful.
It is. But anyway, so back to the student loan Supreme Court. Go ahead.
No problem. It's there's a lot of things that happen that we just kind of scratch our heads with, right? And the student loan forgiveness was one we were scratching our heads with when it got announced. We don't, from our personal opinions, we don't really agree that you should be able to take on an astronomical amount of debt and get it forgiven just because, right? There's consequences to your decisions you make, and we believe strongly in personal responsibility. That being said, we also mentioned that if you were in that position and you were going to get your loans forgiven, that's awesome. You've gotten a gift. Take it and do something amazing with it. And we certainly don't hold it against anyone that was set to receive that student loan forgiveness. And that's a big point. Absolutely not. I mean, it's awesome. It's a gift. I just didn't really want to pay for it.
Well, I'm hoping that folks didn't go out and say, well, this is clearly going to happen, so I have an extra $10,000 to spend, because it's not happening.
And some of our younger folks, I remember having that conversation. I'm like, hold off, like just wait and see this play out, because it's not.
Yeah, don't go spend that check.
Don't go spend that check just yet. We still had a lot to get through, and so that was one of the big things, and that kind of tied in well with I think we posted earlier this week. FAFSA was our
application federal student aid.
There we go. Something. So that's going to be due here coming shortly. Forgot to look up the date before we started, but it's soon.
I think it's today.
Thank you.
I believe it is.
Yeah.
I believe so.
Obviously, very prepared before this holiday weekend here on Friday Live.
Thanks for the warning, Colin. So we have like 4 hours, right?
You have 4 hours to complete the application. I hope you're well on your way. This is what happens when you don't sleep anymore. It's just all a blur and just.
I think it is actually. Don't quote me on that, but we should probably go ahead and look that up.
I'm going to look that up while we're going fast for deadline.
Let's employ the wonders of modern technology and just go ahead and look that up.
Mm-hmm. June 30th, 2023.
So there we go.
So if you haven't done it, make sure you get on that.
Yeah, and that's the standardized application to for just about any post secondary schooling. That's the application that you submit. You got to have 2 years of tax documents. Fill out that information, then they kind of determine what aid by the name that you might qualify for, and paying for secondary, not secondary education. And that form is standardized. All of those institutions accept and expect to see that form. Essentially, you're filling out a whole bunch of information for the government that they have on you, but that they want you to put it in a different format. Because they already have your taxes.
Yeah.
They already know your social security number. They already know your income and that kind of thing. But you fill that out and see what's available. Again, it's kind of important on this topic. They're looking at 2 years back.
Mm-hmm.
That's the income they're determining this stuff on. It's not last year's or this year's income for the fall.
Yep.
And spring of next year's semesters. They look at 2 years back on the income. So there is, some planning that might be able to. It's not applicable to everybody, but if there are ways, for example, if you have an incoming freshman, maybe by the time they're a junior, if you do things in certain ways and kind of shift around when you're receiving different types of income, you may look at it now and say, I don't qualify. I had a pretty good income year 2 years ago. In 2021, very highly possible. But by the time they're juniors, maybe you do qualify. FAFSA gets filled out every year for that reason.
Well, there we go. One kind of side note on this is be thoughtful about if you're using 529 plans to fund your children's college education, be very thoughtful about who owns those and who's you're taking out of, because they're treated differently in regards to FAFSA depending on whether the parents own them or the grandparents own them. So my understanding, and I always have to look this up because it's a bit of a, it's not something we do a ton of, so I always look it up, but it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but once the grandparents start taking money out of their 529, that's fine. But after they start, then it gets reported on the FAFSA as assets under the child because it's being used for the child's benefit. While if the parents own it, it's more beneficial long term. So there's some specific strategies you can employ there. And if that happens to be you, just, either make sure you understand it or we're happy to give you some advice there. But if you're kind of early on the education game and you're starting, it's pretty easy for grandparents to contribute to 529 plans that are owned by their children for their grandkids' benefits. And that's generally the simpler way to do it and what we recommend most of the time. Yeah, it certainly work both ways.
Yeah, what that comes down to in a general concept is the FAFSA reform. They're ultimately looking for, they're fishing for, if you will, what money is available right now for this child. And anything in the child's name, that's exactly what they're doing. They're just,
they found a big one.
Well, what they're doing, the government's saying, just, take me right to where all the fish are. The fish being what money's available for this child right now. If it's in the child's name, they're going to say, well, that's immediately available. A higher percentage of those dollars are available, and I'm going to go get them. So that won't help you in the financial aid because they're saying, well, this child is going to go to school, some sort of schooling, and there's a whole bunch of money right there. They don't need us. No aid. Different percentage, lower percentages for parents and the different types of accounts that they have. So when they look at the parent assets owned by the parents, these are very general statements. They're saying, well, those aren't necessarily all available for the child. Unless you live like I do, which everything I have is available for my children, whether that's a correct parenting
on demand.
It's awake. But from a FAFSA standpoint, they look at the assets that I have and they say, well, that's not all designated for the children. So a lower percentage of that would be accounted for. That's not super detailed, but get the general concept is why Colin's saying, how are these assets owned? Because if you give them all to the kids, the kids say the kid's going to school, the student aid is going to look and say, well, it's all in their name, and clearly their only intention is to pay an egregious amount of money to go to college. So let's make sure that they go ahead and pay that egregious amount for college, and we'll take all their money.
That's what happens when goals align. Great things.
Wait, student has the money. I want the money. Yes,
perfect. Well, let's. I think that's all the big right. That's all the financial stuff we're going to talk about today. I'm going to go around. We're going to play. I said I'm going to look into my crystal ball, and what the crystal ball we're going to consult wants to know is, do you guys have any specific 4th of July, either something you guys do every year with your families or something that was kind of a one-off that's a great 4th of July memory?
No, so I guess the answer to that is no. We don't have kind of the standard. We do barbecue on the 4th of July, put a whole bunch of flags in my front yard and wrap the deck, the railing with the deck with flags. No, historically I had taken the 4th of July to do some motorcycling. I thought it was very important that I exercise that freedom that we are celebrating on the 4th of July. Unfortunately, it's under repair right now, so I won't be able to do that. But that was always my tradition, which is kind of a selfish tradition, but it was only for a little while. Then I'd come back and got a barbecue though. You got to get the grill going, maybe do some smoked ribs.
Well, you got to take care of yourself before you can take care of anybody else.
Well, Adam Smith, Invisible Hand of Economics. Every individual takes care of themselves. The greater good will be taken care of.
Absolutely. Mike, you got anything?
No, nothing specific. I guess most of my 4th of July is covering my dog's ears from the fireworks. They absolutely hate them. But I would say more times than not, we usually do like the traditional hamburgers, hot dogs. But I really like using the smoker these days, so I might have to throw something on there.
Oh, I love it. Well, so this is kind of our second year. We moved last summer and started a new tradition. So in my backyard, we can see all the fireworks from like 3 different places. So we're going to do a little also going to bust out the smoker, get some meats going, just have some neighbors over and just enjoy the backyard and the fireworks without having to go anywhere, which is a big win in my book.
It's ideal.
Try not to blow anybody up. I haven't made it to the. Can you get good fireworks here? I don't remember. I haven't.
You can now.
You can now.
They put some restrictions around it. Some more restrictions, but you can get the real stuff. It goes real high and makes a lot of noise.
On that note, don't blow yourself up out there on the 4th, right? Be safe. Don't drink a bunch and set off fireworks. It's not a good recipe.
No, that's actually illegal in Pennsylvania.
What is illegal or illegal?
It's illegal in Pennsylvania
to drink and set off fireworks.
Yes.
Well, that's
as
it should be. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So other places, I don't know about Florida. It's probably not.
Everything goes in Florida. Just wait. We're gonna turn into Mikey and Big Bob on the 5th and hear the good Florida man stories, right?
I think if you have fireworks in certain parts of Florida, they probably ask and say, "Okay, you can do that, but where's the alcohol?
It's got to go together."
Yeah, it's got to be here somewhere.
Great. Well, Mike, have a great 4th down there. We will do the same up here. Everybody listening, have a wonderful 4th of July. Thanks for joining us this Friday. As always, be safe, and we'll see you next week.
Celebrate independence and freedom.
Absolutely.
Ready.
God bless the USA. Take care.